Monday Morning Matters.
Perspectives from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
Hello, this is Grace.
And you are with us at our Monday Morning Matters, where we discuss issues within Southeast Asia. So currently, when it comes to Southeast Asia, of course, in everyone's mind, the ASEAN Economic Community is one of the single most important outcome coming from the ASEAN community. And of course, talking about ASEAN Economic Community, there's just so many discourse on it. Some positive, some negative. Some might view it as skeptically. Some might think that it's a positive progress towards becoming the next EU, most possibly. But at the same time, at DurianASEAN, we want to analyze ASEAN Economic Community and also try to link up with the larger human rights framework that probably in the case of European Union, they have successfully done it. So first of all, what do you guys think of ASEAN Economic Community?
Well, AEC, to my understanding, of course, would be all the 10 countries coming together, trying to open up and make it easier to trade capital, skills, labor, and to also have a freer flow of all these things that I just mentioned among all the 10 countries. So it's easier for them to get access to one another, and in that way achieve one community and sort of like an economic bloc, like you mentioned earlier. Probably something like the EU, although not quite there yet. And together, all the 10 countries, it seems that we will actually be the fourth largest economy in the world.
That's not surprising, right? I mean, coming from a region with 600 million communities.
And even the economy itself will be worth $2.4 trillion. That is, of course, a very promising figure as well. But like you just said, there are pros and cons, and some people might be skeptical. Some people might actually think this is an encouraging number for us, and we can actually go forward and achieve this.
Well, my side will be, when I heard AEC for the first time, I thought it was very business-focused project. But then after reading and knowing and hearing more about the AEC, it's not only about the business. It covers more and larger areas, such as it also includes healthcare, and meaning that not only they are focusing on their having more foreign investors and or to make a single market in ASEAN and to compete and then perhaps to achieve more desirable than US and Europe, but they also want to focus on the such as the business areas like perhaps tourism and the parts of the healthcare, so they can actually reach out to and extend the area to cover and also to be able to bring more benefits to ASEAN countries. And then they also it was also mentioned about to help out and also to improve SMEs areas, and that falls under AEC category as well.
Actually, there are three main pillars. Of course, we will discuss further about it, which is the political security pillar, economic pillar, and of course, social-cultural pillar.
That's pretty much like what we do at DurianASEAN as well. We
yes,
have the
definitely.
politics, economic, and social-cultural.
But one thing that is unique about the AEC is it's supposed to be a people-centered ASEAN, in a way that the milestone from the humble beginning of the birth of ASEAN in 1967, the ambition is supposed to go towards the idea of creating this ASEAN community where it will benefit the community. But is it really doing so? That's up for discussion. Of course, today we are going to discuss a bit further on this. Just a bit of a background about how AEC was being formulated. So, of course, I mentioned that in 1967, ASEAN was started by a few founders within countries in Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, and Singapore. But throughout the years, there have been a few I would say bilateral or multilateral connectivity among ASEAN leaders. For example, the ASEAN Preferential Trading Agreement, in 1977, and in 1992 they started to formulate this idea called ASEAN Free Trade or AFTA agreement. And from AFTA they increased the framework towards the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services in 1995, and in 1997 on investment. And of course along the line of Mahathir's Vision 2020 for Malaysia, they also have an ASEAN version of Vision 2020. And throughout the years, there have been a few initiatives, such as Initiative for ASEAN Integration in 2002, Bali Concord second in 2003, and Vientiane Action Program in 2004, all towards trying to somehow formulate this idea, and eventually they come out in 2007, the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint, acceleration of AEC towards this year 2015. But from 2015 onwards, there are many discourse on ASEAN Economic Community that is really still very much in the minds of everyone, because a lot of people are still not in the know of what AEC is all about. In fact, if you look at the percentage of Malaysians who actually do not know about ASEAN, it's about 60%. That's a lot of people.
Yes, and also Malaysia has been trying to bring up the awareness in this nation. However, we go back to the ASEAN, as in like covering all 10 countries. Most of countries in the Southeast Asia, they're working towards more to bring up the ASEAN awareness. And then it's actually positive move. And not only the oldest so-called obvious sectors will be benefit from AEC, but they're trying to cover more areas.
And also to look at some statistics like what Arlene mentioned earlier, it seems that about 70% of the firms actually do not know how to use these FTAs in their companies, and about 80% of them do not have an ASEAN strategy to go about doing their business. It's either domestic or it's international, and they are not exactly tapping into our regional market, which of course, like we said earlier, has a very, very huge base, and with the economic value itself that goes up to $2.4 trillion. And it's also tricky when all these companies do not know how to make use of the advantages or the benefits that they can get from AEC. And even talking about AEC itself, of course, it's not just a destination. It's a long process. It's a journey that's going to take place this whole year, and it's not something that we can achieve within a few months. And Arlene, you were saying earlier that it started back in 2007, the whole blueprint of it. So that means it's been 8 years now that this has been in the talks, and it's only being highlighted this year. So for the whole thing to really penetrate through Malaysians or even other people through Southeast Asia, we would assume that it would take some time to get into their heads.
Yes, definitely. And you know, the thing about AEC, when people mention what AEC is exactly, actually there are three really interesting characteristic that people need to know. First is to establish a single market and production base, which means to eliminate tariff and non-tariff barriers, including having elements like free flow of goods, services, investment, capital, and of course skilled labor. And secondly is to have a highly competitive economic region. Right now, majority of the production in this region are those kind of low-end production base rather than high-end or high-skill production, and these are the kind of barriers that governments in Southeast Asia need to address before they can claim themselves of totally achieving the AEC. And thirdly is about a region of equitable economic development. We can see the challenges in AEC right now is some countries are doing very well, like Singapore, but some countries are doing really bad at in terms of economic development. We can see that countries in Indochina area, people there are still living in poverty. The main GDP there is still based on agriculture and other low-end production base. A lot of sweatshops and other factory-based manufacturing production that is not really up to the standard of AEC that they would want to.
These 10 countries really need to, I would say they really need to understand what AEC, not only the benefits of AEC, but how they can come together to make a single market to achieve what is necessary for all those 10 countries.
That is where the idea of ASEAN integration is really important. When people think about ASEAN integration, are they really think about, countries coming together, holding hands, singing world peace? It's not really that case. When we talk about integration, there are 3 objectives to this. One is you want to reduce the development gap among ASEAN member states. Now we have 3 tiers of ASEAN nation: developed, underdeveloped, and of course those that are still in between.
Right.
For example, Malaysia. and of course, number 2 is to promote equitable and sustainable economic growth. You don't want an economic growth that would jeopardize the ecological nature of the country, or you don't want to have an economic growth that will only create more inequality. And thirdly, to enhance connectivity and establish a highly integrated ASEAN. These are the kind of infrastructure building that a lot of people are not really talking about it, but actually is going on underway. For example, building integrated pipelines, integrated transportation system and network. We see how Malaysia and Singapore in the next couple of years will have an integrated railway coming all the way from the southern part, which is Singapore, all the way up to the north to Kuala Lumpur.
And speaking of that, in terms of connectivity, of course, technology also comes into play here, especially when we talk about the awareness of AEC, talking about disseminating the information to the public, to the mass media. What are the ways that are going to be used besides having workshops? Or most of these conferences as well tend to be closed doors within a certain group of people, and that makes it hard for the information to reach out to the public, especially for people who are not linked to the government or have no access to all these conferences. And the challenge here would be to get this information out there to the people at the grassroots level.
And then I can agree with that, because another challenge will be the communication, definitely between the people and then all this ASEAN Economic Community Group, that no matter how many times and how much they discuss about all these objectives and then targets, it's all about the delivering the messages to people and make people be aware of what's going on, so then people can also participate for all these activities, or to achieve the same goal after all.
So we'll take one short break. When we return, we will discuss what exactly is the weakness of ASEAN and the reason why ASEAN Economic Community is having so much challenges, either from the outside or within the region itself, as well as we are talking about human rights issues that we foresee will need to be addressed in order for ASEAN Economic Community will be realized in a way that will benefit the society in Southeast Asia.
Monday Morning Matters. Perspectives from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
Hello, this is Grace.
And we are back again with our discussion on the AEC, and also is it really a people-centered ASEAN, and also its human rights implication if it's not being looked after. So, Gowri,
yes,
when it comes to the AEC, do people really know how it would actually affect their lives individually?
If we're talking about grassroots level, definitely no. But then again, I also have some statistics here that says that even SMEs, almost 90% of the SMEs do not know about AEC or how to use them when it comes to their business, and also when it comes to MNCs, even they don't have a proper strategy to make use of ASEAN in their business. But probably the most famous one that we all know that carefully incorporates ASEAN is AirAsia, because they are really a regional focused company, and everything that Tony Fernandes comes up with tends to be ASEAN focused.
So are you saying that if the government can really address the problems in the economy, they can actually address some of the human rights issues that is happening right now in Southeast Asia?
I'm sure they can, because once you address one part of the problem, it's time to move on to the next one. Even when it comes to human rights itself, of course, there's a huge list of issues that we can talk about, actually, starting with the Rohingyas in Myanmar, the Montagnards in Cambodia, and also in Malaysia itself. We are rife with human rights violations. So it could be a thing of priority as well, when of course the government will focus on economic well-being first before looking at human rights or other parts of other aspects of AEC. But it's all equally important. You can't just have infrastructure and economic development, but then your human rights in the country is so bad that everyone has such a bad impression about you.
But there seems to be like a parallel idea about what ASEAN integration or ASEAN community ought to be. From the side of civil society, it's all about addressing the human rights concerns. But from the side of government, they seem to close one eye, or at least they are scared to address certain issue because it's too highly controversial, also because ASEAN itself, the way it's being formulated, is so different from European Union. In European Union, it has its own court system or its own institution. So let's say you are a member of EU and your country is committing a huge human rights violation. So other country can actually hold you accountable in their own parliament and court system. But when it comes to ASEAN, everything revolves around consensus, and it's part of the ASEAN Charter. And I think this is the biggest weakness of ASEAN, where you can't really say bad things about other people even though you know they are killing their own people.
And also, we don't have a written or exact form of ASEAN law or policies that, there is no standards or set for, all those 10 members to follow. So when it comes to human rights, some countries may, allow certain issues, however some countries don't. So that creates a clashes between, ideas and laws. And when it comes to, like you say about human rights, especially capital punishment, some countries may just allow them to just go ahead with the law. But however, some countries like this is totally against the human rights.
It's all about creating dialogues in ASEAN. As far as I know, if you look at the ASEAN Economic Community in the ASEAN page, you'll see so many rounds of ministerial meetings, and all of it are held in really beautiful islands.
Like we mentioned this morning, a lot of retreats, a lot of getaways for our ministers.
So in this year's rounds of ministerial meeting, we saw that a lot of the meetings was held in places like Kota Kinabalu, in Langkawi, and all the beautiful places in Southeast Asia. Not that it's not anything wrong, but if you look at the thematic ministerial meetings that are being discussed, it's very focused, which is great. But at the same time, it's also not addressing the elephant in the room. For example, let me talk about ASEAN Economic Community. They have economic ministerial meeting, free trade meeting on energy, agriculture, blah blah blah, but they don't really have a meeting where they address the kind of issues that will rise up due to the kind of energy and other forms of commodity sectors or economic activity that they want to generate or they want to implement in Southeast Asia.
And also, it goes back to what you said earlier, that most of it is done based on consensus. And Grace also mentioned that there is no proper written form that we can actually follow. Yes, we have a blueprint, but that doesn't mean that it's a mandatory thing that every country has to follow this way, this particular framework of doing things. So when a lot of things is based on consensus, it can easily change according to the discretion of each country as well. Like we were also saying, some countries may go ahead and allow certain punishment, whereas some countries will actually go against it. So for us to actually have a uniform way of doing things might be very tricky, because we're talking about 10 countries coming together with very, very different perspectives and mindsets on one particular issue, especially something like human rights, which still seems to be very alien to us.
And a lot of people might not realize this. If you compare Southeast Asia with European Union, another key differentiation is European Union think like one, even though they might be different in terms of the way they govern themselves. But in ASEAN countries, we don't think like one, partly because our allegiance when it comes to big brothers, some of us might be closer to the US, some might be closer to China, some might be in between, meaning that they want to be neutral. Like for example, Malaysia and Singapore, we have always remained neutral in terms of our foreign policy, but countries like Philippines have always been a strong ally with the US, while Vietnam has always have a rough patch with China. But at the same time, you see countries like Cambodia and Myanmar having really close ties with China. So you see the different allegiance or foreign policy in each countries within Southeast Asia. It won't actually bear a unified outcome. You can see clearly in the South China Sea issue. Until now they cannot reach a consensus where they are able to stand a firm sort of voice against China.
Doesn't mean that this conflict is like forever issues, for ASEAN, because after all, a lot of platforms are already provided, open debate for all these 10 member states to come in and then to talk about, especially regarding human issues. But what's the most important is to look for solutions rather than just talking about issues all the time, because we already know what the issues are. But then no matter the differences between this country and that country and how this country is close to outside of ASEAN region, it's a matter of how we can bring up all this relationship with other countries to benefit ASEAN and to think like ASEAN as your own identity rather than I'm from Malaysia, that's it, I'm from Malaysia.
But when it comes to different countries, like you were saying, with different big brothers, it does affect all big sisters. It does actually affect how the countries come together. Because, for example, if Philippines were to have a pact with Vietnam on whatever issue, and that would also already have a little conflict right there, because one is a lot closer to the US and one is more pro-China, or it can be any other country, and that would definitely affect the way that they deal with things, the kind of solutions that they would come up with for the problem. And also with Myanmar, with Cambodia, especially the relationship that Myanmar has with China as well, with the rebel clashes where China is actually helping them, but Philippines tend to have a very strong distaste for China as well. So these big countries, although they are not part of ASEAN, especially the US, they are also indirectly playing a role in the whole integration process that we're trying to achieve here.
Definitely. So at the end of the day, I think a lot of the differences among Southeast Asian countries need to be smoothened out in order for them to be able to come together. We'll take another one short break. When we return, we will talk more about ASEAN People's Forum statement, which highlighted the human rights issue, which highlights the human rights issue in ASEAN, and also is really ASEAN ready for AEC? We'll talk more about the challenges that AEC will be facing in the coming decades.
Monday Morning Matters. Perspectives from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
This is Grace.
And we are back again in our Monday Morning Matters. So, continuing our discussion on the AEC. Earlier on, we discussed the weakness of the ASEAN Charter and also the differences among Southeast Asia's foreign policy direction. But talking about human rights is not really something that is there's an issue. It's not really an issue that is a surprising issue, because in Southeast Asia there's a lot of human rights violation. And a lot of these are being documented, and thanks to Tun Abdullah Badawi 10 years ago, he started the ASEAN People's Forum, which is a platform for civil society in Southeast Asia to voice out their concern on the human rights violation. And one of the violation that they keep on saying again and again is how the labor market has been misused. Either workers are being underpaid, or they are not being or they are being exploited, or there's a lot of black market that the government do not really address, which exploit people like sex workers and all that. So in a way that if you look at human rights in Southeast Asia, it's so huge that it's hard to actually address it one by one.
And also, for example, we did report this news in Cambodia, where they have even the local Cambodia, they work for all those foreign companies, big companies, especially retail industry, and then they are treated very unfairly in terms of working hours, even the payment, and then especially the females. A majority are females who work in the all this industry. They're treated even worse than
even
male
the pregnant
workers.
ones.
Yes. So it sort of brings the very negative images to other countries when it comes to ASEAN identity.
And going back to what Grace said, all these little countries, even when it comes to Myanmar or Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, we know that especially all the civil societies in these countries, even with what happened with the building of the dam, that it was actually very, very disastrous to the local landscape. But because the voice of the civil societies are not really heard, and they're not that strong, they cannot come together and voice it out, even in their own country. So how would that affect in a regional level if their own country doesn't really hear their voice, doesn't give them the power to voice out concerns of the local people? How can ASEAN do something about it?
Yeah, I think a lot of the major problem that we have right now, first, I think the structure of a lot of the countries in Southeast Asia, especially the political structure, it lacks democracy, the element of democracy. Second, I think the governments all over Southeast Asia are not giving priority in terms of providing a clear framework for human rights. Although we have AICHR, which is the ASEAN Human Rights Intergovernmental Commission, which is great. It's a great start anyway. But from the ASEAN People's Forum perspective, they actually released a statement which they want governments in Southeast Asia to address. First is about development justice, as what you mentioned, Gowri, on creating either labor law or development blueprint that is based on fair and equal, based on fairness and based on justice. And second is about governance. They are seeking for government in Southeast Asia to look at democracy as the main blueprint for any country in Southeast Asia, and of course to uphold the fundamental rights and freedoms of its citizens. And of course the next one is peace and security. This is for all Southeast Asian government to be able to focus on providing avenue for people in Southeast Asia to be able to live independently, individually, without the fear of threats. And next is about discrimination and inequality. I think this is a major problem, especially you have very unequal economic development. Of course, they also recommend a few areas that they want ASEAN government to really uphold. Some of the recommendation is about upholding international human rights principles and standards, ensuring accountability to all ASEAN people, and of course strengthening all the mandates of thirdly is strengthening the mandates of all the ASEAN Charter. One is AICHR, ACWC, ACMV, ASEAN Declaration on the Promotion of the Rights of Migrant Workers, and also future human rights mechanism. So there's a lot of work that the government needs to do, especially in strengthening its current institution, declarations, and also mechanism?
I think what about what you mentioned earlier about the charter, I think the most important part was actually the discrimination that is taking place in a lot of countries, be it Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, all the Indochina countries, or even in Brunei, Philippines. Discrimination is something that is very rife, especially when it comes to the rights of foreign workers, how they are being treated, which is why Indonesia also came up with a very harsh measure of calling all the Indonesian workers back home because of how they were being treated in the Southeast Asian nations itself. So for us to come together and to go for an integration, I would think that the most important area to address first is of course human rights, and also to look at the discriminatory point of view. Also going back to what Grace said about labor laws, workers in Cambodia being overworked, pregnant women not getting their rights, their days off, they even have kids because of the short-term contract that is not supposed to be that way, but because they don't want to comply to these people, they make it that way to get the most out of these people and giving them as less as possible.
And also, in addition to that, with all those issues and matters that we've mentioned so far, after all, we need to know, not only us, but then the government. All those 10 governments need to articulate the demands on the what's most urgent issues in
Put
Southeast
priorities,
Asia.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So then they can actually amend the root or fix the root first, rather than just fixing the surface only. It looks like they're just covering by just giving all those addressing issues and then publicizing all those issues to the public. However, but where are the solutions after all?
And one interesting point people need to realize, I'm not defending ASEAN, but people need to realize that budget for ASEAN Secretariat is very, very low, to the extent that they are not be able to employ that many people. If you compare to European Union, they are able to employ thousands of people to make sure that the mechanism works well. For civil society, they want ASEAN to address all this mechanism, the ICHR, ACWC and all that, but they don't realize for ASEAN, they're only able to employ like only a few hundreds of people, and only based in Jakarta. So in that sense, if so few people are working on such huge issue in all over Southeast Asia, which have 600 million people, I'm sure even with so many people having good spirit within ASEAN Secretariat, they are not able to address it. They are outnumbered.
Well, for sure, they are outnumbered, and then they really need to reclaim the people's space in the regional process, policies especially, and the governance, and also to advocate all this alternative regionalism in Southeast Asia.
And going back to that, when it comes to the whole idea of getting people together and to talk about integration itself, ASEAN, the Human Rights Declaration itself talks a lot about how everyone has the right to freedom of expression, freedom of thought, that they are free, they are not bound to anybody by anything. So it's not enough for them to just, of course, put it in the declaration, put it in the charter, like Grace mentioned. It's time to actually walk the talk. And if you're going to guarantee people all this freedom, make sure they really get it. And it's not just on the surface level, like, yes, they get this, they get that. But when you go down to the grassroots level, people are still suffering and being oppressed and abused by their employers.
We'll take one last break. When we return, we will discuss more about the way forward, especially on ASEAN post-2015.
Monday Morning Matters. Perspectives from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hello, this is Gowri.
Welcome back, this is Grace.
And of course, you are listening to us at DurianASEAN on our Monday Morning Matters. So, coming back to AEC, I just want to mention a few of the challenges of AEC that people need to realize that market-wise, yes, you need to address this, but also in terms of human rights. We mentioned a lot of the human rights issue, and also, of course, the statement released by the ASEAN People's Forum, and And at the same time, challenges from within AEC itself and within ASEAN Charter and ASEAN's position in this region. But at the same time, I just want to mention a few other challenges that if AEC to be a successful post-ASEAN 2015, they need to address this. One is tariff and non-tariff barriers and local protectionism. So if they need to liberalize the economy to make sure that all economy in Southeast Asia are on the same path first before they do that. Inconsistent regulation and policies across Southeast Asia. This is obvious when you have a very poor country like Laos to compete with rich countries like Malaysia and Singapore. It doesn't work that way. Another thing that they need to address is weak infrastructure links. What can we say more? I mean, even with our Skype interview with our partners and speakers in other Southeast Asian countries, one of the biggest challenge is getting a good Wi-Fi access for them and for ourselves. And of course, another one is diverse levels of market maturity. Southeast Asian is still a very young market, considering that even though we have 600 million population, a lot of the people still cannot afford to be consumers to the extent that we want it to be. And of course, in terms of the products that we produce, also are much focus more on the low end sort of production. And of course, another one that is really important is labor workforce. I think in this sense, we need to focus on cultural diversity, we need to focus on the rights of workers, and we need to focus on restriction on we need to focus on getting better access for foreign investment and labor, as well as to create a platform where people in Southeast Asia can leverage a good education system and a good healthcare services. So these are a lot of things to handle,
And I also want to talk a little bit about the mobility among skilled workers in the region, since one of the post-AEC goal is actually to strengthen human resource development. And it says that once AEC is on the implementation, and once we're almost there, it can actually increase the terms of employment to up to 90%. And of course, that's great because we have a lot of unemployment issues going on in Malaysia, in other countries as well, in Indonesia. And one of the ways to do that is to have skilled workers who can easily be mobilized from one country to another. But of course, in order to do that, they need a framework as well. For someone, it's very easy for somebody from Indonesia to come over here, somebody from Myanmar or Cambodia, which is already happening right now. But what's going to happen to them after they come to the country? Does the government just let them go, forget about them?
Just give example of Malaysia. We have one of the highest refugee as well as migrant workers, either documented or undocumented. It shows how much the government is closing one eye on the issues regarding on addressing AEC when we can't even take care of our own backyard.
And in Malaysia also, we had a few accidents regarding MRT constructions, and those were foreign workers. And then how the government addressed this issue was very light. And what are the other policies that was amended after that? Nothing was done.
Yeah, that's true. When we look at the papers, it's always like 2 workers died, 2 workers died, 2 workers died. But if you keep adding on all that numbers, it's actually quite a huge number of workers who have already died so far by just the MRT construction. And of course, that's just one example. There are a lot of other instances as well where the workers are not being cared for. So when we have this mobilization of skilled workers, it's very important that the government starts having like a follow-up system or something to make sure that they are being taken care of and that they are doing well in the country.
And also they really need to consider security for all those foreign workers, and not only developing their skills and training their skills, but they also need to be able to protect all these people.
And I think that's the biggest challenge of AEC, the fact that they cannot have this two classes of society,
Right.
where this is the citizen of the country, and the second class would be the migrant workers, the undocumented illegal workers, the refugees. It shouldn't happen that way. I think another area that I really want to address is people in Southeast Asia itself. I give example of Malaysians and Singaporeans. I think one of the biggest problem with us is we still have this xenophobic mentality towards people who we assume of a lower socioeconomic than us, and majority of them are migrant workers, refugees, people who are not part of the Malaysian citizen. Usually we will look down on them. I think you still remember when people would call Bangladeshi as Bangla, or people would call people from other country as in a derogative way. And if we don't address the mindset, it's hard to create an ASEAN where we respect each other.
Because at the end of the day, when we talk about ASEAN or AEC, it's all of us coming together as one. And it's not about saying that, oh, I'm Malaysian and you're not, you're from another country that we don't really like. So long as we still have that mindset, it's very difficult, because but the whole idea of integration really has to start in your head before we put it down on paper or do it economically or politically.
And we talked about like all this employment stuff, but then also freedom of our expression that also heavily involves with human rights, especially not only media but then just the people in general. If they are against, or they really want to voice out what they really think about the government or even ASEAN, they need to have a platform to voice out and to be able to communicate smoothly with other, perhaps people from other nations or even the high authorities.
So, I mean, when we talk about a people-centered ASEAN, the government need to realize that creating platform is one thing, but allowing people to voice out their concern, I think, is important. Because at the end of the day, when people are voicing out their concern, if you don't listen to them, definitely they will revolt, they will create a revolution or whatever, and you can always curtail their voices, but it will only be temporary. And at the end of the day, the outcome of AEC or ASEAN post 2015 will be how democratic the people of Southeast Asian is, meaning that people are able to live as an individual who can exercise his freedom of expression, who can be respected for his own dignity and his own self-belief. So at the end of the day, what is your takeaway for this topic?
I think when it comes to AEC, like I mentioned earlier, I would like to reiterate the fact that the integration has to start in our heads, do away with all the negative ideas that we have about different countries, because we want to look at what every country can offer when it comes to an integration. We have 10 countries, 10 very different countries, different skills, different set of people, and it's much more important to look at what each of them can actually contribute and bring into the whole idea of ASEAN, instead of being discriminatory and, like you said, using derogatory terms against people. So the way forward from here, of course, first of all, to start with our own mentality and to respect one another, and also for the government to actually keep track of the people who leave the country as well, and make sure that they are taken care of, because human rights, I think, is the most important thing to address when it comes to integration.
For me, I feel that the government needs to ensure that when it comes to economic development, make sure that it's a holistic development, meaning that it should be coming from the consensus of the local community, the government, as well as civil society in general. And in the larger context, it would be, I mean, the spirit of Southeast Asia is supposed to be about the society in Southeast Asia. It's not supposed to be just the government. So the structure of ASEAN itself needs to be changed to a more democratic system.
And to me, I would love to say just one word, which is stop being secretive. Because especially Malaysia and also a few parts of Southeast Asia are quite well known for being secretive, until the point that, sometimes when they want to turn right in the car, they don't even signal themselves.
Right.
So please be transparent to the public from the government authorities and to reach out the bigger audience and to be able to hear what they need to say. And we would love to hear what our listeners need to say about coming up ASEAN Economic Community and as well as any matters regarding ASEAN. Do look for us at our website, DurianASEAN.com, and we do have our social channels such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.